Achilles was born from a prophecy, destined for greatness but doomed to die young. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, could not bear the thought of losing her son, so she sought to make him invincible. She dipped the infant in the River Styx, rendering him impervious to harm, except for the heel she held him by. This single flaw, this one vulnerable spot, would eventually seal his fate. As Achilles grew, he was raised by the wise centaur Chiron, who molded him into the greatest warrior the world had ever seen. Under his tutelage, Achilles mastered the art of war, surpassing all others in strength, speed, and skill. But no amount of training could prepare him for the treachery he would face. When the Trojan War erupted, Thetis, desperate to keep her son safe, disguised him as a woman and hid him in the court of King Lycomedes. Yet, Achilles' destiny could not be avoided. Odysseus, cunning as ever, uncovered his hiding place by laying out weapons among jewels and fine cloth. While the other women admired the luxury, Achilles reached for the sword, exposing himself as the warrior he was meant to be. With no more excuses to hide, Achilles set sail for Troy, commanding 50 ships and his elite warriors, the Myrmidons. From the moment he stepped onto the battlefield, the Trojans trembled before him. He slaughtered their finest warriors, even felling Cycnus, the mighty son of Poseidon, who had been thought invulnerable. Achilles was unstoppable, a force of nature. But then came the betrayal that would change everything. Agamemnon, the Greek commander, had taken the priestess Chrysis as his prize, but when her father, a priest of Apollo, pleaded for her return, the king refused. In his wrath, Apollo unleashed a devastating plague upon the Greek army. To appease the god, Agamemnon reluctantly released Chrysis, but in an act of pure arrogance, he demanded Achilles' prize, the beautiful Briseis, in return. This was an insult Achilles could not bear. The warrior, who had fought and bled for the Greeks, was now being humiliated by his own commander. Enraged, he drew his sword, ready to strike Agamemnon down, but the goddess Athena intervened, restraining him. Instead of spilling blood, Achilles vowed never to fight for the Greeks again. He withdrew from battle, taking the Myrmidons with him, leaving the Greeks to suffer without their mightiest warrior. The absence of Achilles was catastrophic. The Trojans, led by Hector, drove the Greeks back, burning their ships and threatening total annihilation. Seeing their destruction unfold, Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion and most beloved friend, could not stand idly by. He begged Achilles to return, but the warrior refused. Desperate, Patroclus donned Achilles' armor and led the Myrmidons into battle himself. He fought valiantly, even pushing the Trojans back, but he made the fatal mistake of facing Hector. Hector, believing he was fighting Achilles, struck Patroclus down. As the young warrior lay dying, he gasped that Achilles would avenge him. And with that, his spirit fled. News of Patroclus' death shattered Achilles. His grief turned into an all-consuming rage. The betrayal of Agamemnon had wounded his pride, but the loss of Patroclus tore at his very soul. Achilles donned new armor, forged by the god Hephaestus himself, and returned to battle with a singular goal, Hector's death. The Trojan prince knew what was coming. He waited outside the city gates, but when he saw Achilles charging at him like a god of war, fear overtook him. He ran. 3 times he circled the walls of Troy before he was finally forced to stand his ground. He begged Achilles for an honorable pact, that the winner would return the loser's body for a proper burial. But Achilles had no mercy left. "There are no oaths between lions and men," he growled before driving his spear through Hector's heart. Still, his rage was not satisfied. Achilles tied Hector's corpse to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy for all to see. He denied the Trojans the right to mourn their fallen hero, a punishment crueler than death itself. But that night, King Priam, Hector's father, came to Achilles' tent. The old king knelt before his son's killer, begging for his body. Achilles, moved by the sight of a grieving father, finally relented. He returned Hector's body and allowed the Trojans to give their hero the funeral he deserved. But fate had not forgotten Achilles. Though he was the strongest warrior, even he could not escape his destiny. Soon after, Paris, Hector's cowardly brother, fired a single arrow, guided by Apollo, straight into Achilles' only weak spot, his heel. The great warrior fell, his life slipping away as the Greeks and Trojans watched in stunned silence. The mightiest of all heroes, brought down not in battle, but by a trick of the gods. Achilles' death was not just a loss for the Greeks but a turning point in the war. His absence left a void that no warrior could truly fill, and his comrades, though victorious, felt the weight of his sacrifice. The war raged on, but something had changed. The invincible Achilles was no more, and the fate of Troy was now sealed. In the aftermath, the Greeks honored Achilles with a grand funeral. His body was burned on a towering pyre, and his ashes were mixed with those of his beloved Patroclus. The sight of the flames licking the sky was both a tribute and a warning. The greatest warrior of the age had fallen, and his legend would echo through eternity. The Myrmidons, now leaderless, stood in solemn silence, knowing they had lost not just a commander, but a godlike figure who had led them to countless victories. The war, however, was far from over. Inspired by his father's death, Pyrrhus, also known as Neoptolemus, arrived on the shores of Troy, ready to avenge Achilles. With a fury that seemed almost divine, he fought with reckless abandon, showing no mercy to the Trojans. He was every bit his father's son, merciless, unstoppable, and driven by the same thirst for blood that had made Achilles legendary. The final days of Troy were a nightmare for its people. The Greeks, desperate to end the war, devised the ultimate deception, the Trojan horse. Odysseus, the mastermind behind the ruse, led the construction of a massive wooden horse, in which the best Greek warriors, including Pyrrhus, hid. The Trojans, believing it to be a gift, brought the horse into their city, unknowingly inviting their own doom. That night, as the Trojans slept, Pyrrhus and the Greek warriors emerged from the horse, unleashing chaos upon the unsuspecting city. Troy burned as screams filled the air. In the heart of the carnage, Pyrrhus sought out King Priam, who had once ruled over a mighty kingdom. The old king, broken and powerless, sought refuge at the altar of Zeus, but there was no mercy left in the heart of Achilles' son. Pyrrhus struck him down in cold blood, ensuring that Troy's last hope for survival was extinguished. The destruction of Troy marked the end of an era. The gods had played their game, weaving the fates of men as they saw fit, and in the end, even the mightiest warrior of all could not escape his destiny. Achilles had been betrayed by his own allies, robbed of the glory he deserved, and felled by a coward's arrow. Yet, despite his tragic end, his name would never be forgotten. Legends of Achilles spread far beyond the battlefields of Troy. His tale was sung by poets, whispered by warriors, and honored by kings. His deeds became the measure of heroism, his rage a symbol of unrelenting power. Though the gods had written his fate in stone, Achilles had ensured that his name would live forever.